Who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? That is the question that the lawyer poses to Jesus at the start of this morning's gospel story from Luke's gospel. Who is my neighbor? Notice, though, Jesus doesn't answer the question, and in fact, he challenges it. This lawyer is no fool. He's well-educated, well-respected, and calculating, and he knows the law inside and out. And I think what he's really asking is this: what is the bare minimum I have to do in order to be righteous before God? What is the bare minimum I have to do in order for things to be good between me and God? How far does love have to go before I've done my part? In other words, what are the limits of love? But Jesus, as he so often does, flips the question entirely. Because love, he knows, it isn't about calculating limits. It is about something else entirely. It is about noticing the needs of those around us. So instead of answering, "Who is my neighbor?" Jesus invites the man, and all of us, for that matter, to consider something deeper. What does it mean for you to be a neighbor? What does it mean for you and I to be a neighbor, for that matter? And more importantly, what does it mean for us to be a neighbor as Christians, as those striving to follow Jesus? Because for us, as Christians, being a neighbor isn't just a nice idea. It's not just some vague encouragement to be kind. Jesus isn't giving us a lesson in manners or moral etiquette here. He is calling us to be a different kind of neighbor. To be a neighbor in a way that will run counter to the values of the world and our surrounding culture sometimes. To be a neighbor in ways that will at times be inconvenient, risky, costly. To be a neighbor in ways that will demand something from us. We will look at what our gospel story says about how to be a neighbor in a moment. But first, let's look at what it says about how not to be a neighbor. In the gospel, Jesus tells a parable about a man who has been beaten and robbed and left for dead on the roadside. This man is vulnerability embodied, bloody, broken, ignored. And who is it that comes along first? A priest, and then a Levite. These are the respectable ones, the religious professionals, the people that you would expect to be willing to help out. But they don't. They don't even stop. They don't even move toward the man. In fact, they move away, passing by on the other side of the road. We're not told why. Maybe they're in a hurry. Maybe they feared becoming ritually unclean because they assumed that the body on the other side of the road was already dead. Maybe they were overwhelmed by the sheer weight of need in their world. Maybe they were just numb, suffering from what some of us now call compassion fatigue. That feeling you have when you've seen so much pain that you just stop knowing how to respond. Whatever the reason, the message from that first part of the parable is clear. That is not how to be a good neighbor. But then comes along the Samaritan. And remember, in Jesus' time, Samaritans were hated by Jews, despised, distrusted, considered impure, and even heretical. So when Jesus makes the Samaritan the hero of this whole story, it is not just surprising, it would have been offensive. It would have shocked the crowd listening. It would have been like telling this parable today and flipping the roles. The religious leader, me perhaps, walks away, and the one who shows mercy is the enemy, the outcast, the one that everyone looks down on, whoever that might be in our world today. And what does the Samaritan do when he sees the man on the side of the road. Well, the gospel writer Luke says he is moved with pity. He's moved with pity. The thing is, that English phrase doesn't quite capture the depth of what is involved in this encounter, because the Greek word used here means something much more powerful, much more visceral. It literally means when the Good Samaritan sees the man, his guts are wrenched. His guts are wrenched. The Samaritan felt it in his body. It was a physical reaction to the suffering of another. It's the same phrase Luke uses when the father sees the prodigal son returning home. It's the same phrase used when Jesus sees the widow of Nain burying her only son. This isn't abstract pity. It's not the soft sentiment of a Hallmark card. This is a gut-wrenching compassion, the kind you feel in your chest like a weight, or in your stomach like a pit. The polar opposite of the indifference shown by the priest and the Levite. I bet we have all felt this kind of compassion before at some point in time in our lives. Witnessed a friend or family member or someone else we love suffer. Heard someone's story that broke our heart. Saw pain up close and felt it deep in our body. If we have, that is the compassion of the Good Samaritan, the compassion of a neighbor. But here's the thing, the parable doesn't stop with how the Samaritan feels, because being a neighbor isn't just about emotion. More importantly, it's also about action. The Samaritan doesn't just feel compassion, he acts on it. He bandages the man's wounds. He pours oil and wine to soothe and disinfect them. He lifts him onto his own animal. He brings him to an inn. He stays with him. And when he has to leave, he makes sure that this care will continue, paying out of pocket, promising to return. His compassion is not just felt, it is embodied. It becomes mercy in motion. At the end of the parable, Jesus asks the lawyer, which of these three was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? And the lawyer answers, the one who showed him mercy. The one who showed him mercy. Mercy. I always think this sounds like an old-fashioned word, but it's really the key to this whole parable. Writing about mercy, the Jesuit moral theologian Jim Keenan has said, mercy is the willingness to enter into the chaos of another. Mercy is the willingness to enter into the chaos of another. This is the heart of this parable. Because to be a neighbor for Christians is to be willing to enter into someone else's chaos, and especially the chaos of those who are most vulnerable among us. To show up for them, to accompany them, to walk alongside them, not to run away, to refuse to turn away when suffering feels like it's too much to bear, to allow our own lives to be interrupted. And if any of that sounds familiar, then it should, because all of that is exactly what Jesus does. Jesus is the one who enters fully into our human chaos. He doesn't run away. He doesn't pass by to the other side. He kneels in the dust. He binds up our wounds. He carries the broken to safety. He stays. And he hopes that we will do the same. My friends, this is an urgent message for our time, because we are living in a moment when many, including many who profess to call themselves Christians, have forgotten what it means to be a neighbor. A moment when the most vulnerable among us are not just being ignored, but actively targeted. A moment when the poor are blamed for their poverty, when migrants and refugees are treated like threats, when LGBTQ people are demonized in laws and rhetorics, when children go hungry and the sick are left to fend for themselves. A time when those in power are not simply walking by on the other side of the road, but making policies that push the most vulnerable among us further into the ditch. It is a scandal, and it is a sin. And in a time like this, it can be easy to feel overwhelmed. A time when there is so much needless suffering, so much chaos, so many people lying on the side of the road. If we're honest, especially those of us with some amount of privilege and stability in our lives, it can be tempting to look away, to numb ourselves, to do nothing. Just last week, I was at a dinner sitting next to a professor, not a Christian, but a brilliant scholar, who told me that she has chosen not to look at the news anymore. And I get that. To bury one's head in the sand in the name of self-preservation is alluring these days. But as Christians, followers of the Lord Jesus Christ, this is simply not an option. Because we follow a God who does not stay distant, a God who in Jesus chose to enter into the world's pain, to stand with those who suffer, to love with mercy, a God who calls us, his body in the world today, to do the same. So where do we begin? Well, I don't have all the answers, nor would I presume to tell each of you how you are called to love the neighbors in your lives. But the fact is, we have to start somewhere. We have to let ourselves feel, we have to let ourselves see that person in the ditch. And then we have to do something. Maybe it's cooking a meal for the Porchlight Men's Shelter housed here at St. Thomas during the month of July. Maybe it's mentoring a refugee family through the diocese's resettlement program. Maybe it's advocating for those whose voices are being silenced. Or maybe it's just refusing to look away. Whatever it is, keep your heart in the game. Let compassion move you viscerally. Let mercy become your way of life. Because the truth is, the world doesn't need any more bystanders. It needs neighbors, real neighbors, the kind who aren't afraid to cross the road, the kind who aren't afraid to enter into someone else's chaos, the kind who aren't afraid to love, whatever the cost.